me throw one more at you. I don't know what this says. I don't think the NFL is punishing anybody, but we've talked about this on the air. The older your team is, the more they get hurt, and the longer it takes for older players to recover from injuries. When a young guy gets hurt, remember when Ant got hurt in the NBA? They're like, oh, he's going to be out the entire series. Game 1, I'm ready. Jason Tatum, he'll be out the whole year. It doesn't work. Young athletes heal much faster. Check out the Niners schedule. Look at this 8-game stretch starting mid-November. This is an old team with players, Evans, Greenlaw, Bosa, McCaffrey, Trent Williams, older players who have had injuries. That is a rough schedule. Cowboys, Vikings in Mexico, Seahawks at New York cross country. I mean, look at all the trips. Mexico, New York, Midwest. That is a rough 8-game stretch for an old team that's going to get banged up. I mean, it's been like a 6-year trend in San Francisco, the way they play physically. So I think that San Francisco schedule, I think the Niners will end up, we'll get all excited. Maybe the NFL knows, like we don't know how this is going to work out, but we want to keep them in the discussion early. But I thought the Niners' late schedule for an old team is rough.
All right. Let's dive into the 49ers schedule. So, I'm not entirely sure if Colin is suggesting that from week 10 onward, basically the second half of the slate, things get tricky. Like maybe the opening portion is softer, so they'll stay in the mix, and then the back end gets significantly tougher. But then they could also suffer injuries along the way, and as a result, they wouldn't be prepared for the postseason. Because you have to go through Dallas, Minnesota, Seattle, the New York Giants, the LA Rams, the Chargers, Kansas City, Philadelphia, all tough, physical contests. A bunch of those players will get banged up over the course of those matchups. And then they're not ready when the wildcard round comes around. Assuming they even qualify for the playoffs. I'm not sure. Yeah, look, here's my take on this 49ers schedule. It's honestly pretty funny. I look at this and I try to ask myself, what stands out to me? Because when I'm reviewing these schedules, every team has such a different collection of games. Even if you're facing some of the same opponents, it matters when you play them. Are they clustered together? What's the sequence? And honestly, a schedule either works for you or it doesn't. You either glance at it and think, okay, that actually looks pretty good. Or you look at it and go, ooh, that feels rough. And when I look at this 49ers schedule, I just sort of think, I don't know, it just looks like a normal schedule to me right now. I'm not trying to factor in things like, well, they're an aging roster and all that. I'm not considering that. And Colin was saying something like, oh, they want to keep the 49ers relevant for the first half because we don't know how this whole thing will shake out. So at least we have something to talk about for the first 9 weeks. And it's like, well, I thought the LA Rams were a strong team. The Denver Broncos were the 1 seed last year. Seattle won the Super Bowl. Right? Washington should rebound with Jaden Daniels, etc. But I suppose technically the Miami Dolphins and the Arizona Cardinals are question marks. We'll see what happens with Atlanta, we'll see what happens with the Raiders, especially by week 9, who's their quarterback, is it Mendoza, Kirk Cousins, etc. But I guess the second column, week 10 onward, the back half of the schedule, is clearly much more defined in terms of the opponents you're facing and their potential. At the very least, the defenses of those teams. Minnesota has a great defense. Seattle obviously has a great defense. The Rams' defense should be significantly better. The Chargers' defense will be great. The Chiefs' defense will be great. The Eagles' defense will be great. Again, how great these teams will be overall and how complete they'll be, I don't know, but their defenses should still not be liabilities or weaknesses. So those games should be physical. But in terms of traveling, like, well, you have to go to New York across the country, it's like, yeah, I don't know. You have to travel. That's especially true if you're a team on the coast. If you're Philly or New York or LA, yeah, you have to fly across the country. That's just how it works. Look, I've lived on both coasts and I had to fly back and forth. One direction is really quick and the other direction feels much longer and more draining. When you go from east to west, it's a lot more grueling. The time zone throws you off a bit because it feels like such a long plane ride. Some of it is the jet stream, but it just feels longer, could be 7 hours or whatever. But essentially only about 3 hours pass because of the time zone change. Going the other direction, it's a lot faster, you can get there in about 5 hours, but you lose 3 hours because of the time zone again. So yeah, that can be a little tricky, but I'm not too concerned about it. I'm not going to lose sleep over that. But the point is, you're in New York. Then you go back to LA, actually no, you go back home, then you go to LA, then you go to Kansas City, but then you're home for Philly. I don't know. That doesn't seem too crazy to me. It would be one thing if it was at New York and then at Philly, then I could understand. That would feel like you're zigzagging back and forth repeatedly. But that's not the case here. So yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. If you read between the lines, Colin is essentially saying, the 49ers are going to have a great first half of the season. Everyone will buy into them. We'll talk about them as a top team. We'll say, oh wow, look at them, they're 6-2 or something, whatever it is. And then the second half is going to be tough, physical, with injuries piling up, and then it's just over. Then there will be a collapse, and the truth will reveal itself. That's my read on what Colin is kind of saying right now. Whether that's actually the reality of what he's alluding to, I don't know. But yeah, this schedule I would say is definitely one of the more split down the middle ones. I'll admit that the first half is pretty prototypical. You're going to have some tough games, some easy games, some gifts here and there. Okay, great. And then the second half, outside of the Arizona Cardinals, a lot of those are all going to be competitive contests. From week 10 through week 17, that is competitive game after competitive game after competitive game. But that's just football, man. Sure, it would be nice to have the Arizona Cardinals game smack dab in the middle. And again, we'll see what the New York Giants end up being. I think either way, no matter who the quarterback is for Minnesota, it'll still be a tougher game, like I said, at the very least because of their defense. The Dallas Cowboys are always an interesting bunch. Same thing with a team like the Eagles. Maybe their offense isn't as great, or there are issues with Jalen Hurts, whatever. But you still can never count out the Philadelphia Eagles, we know that from history. Same thing with the Chiefs and the Chargers. So no matter how great or not great the teams are in the second half, it should still feel competitive. Even if someone says, oh, clearly the Eagles aren't having a great year, or clearly the Chiefs aren't truly what they once were, it should still be a tough, physical game. Those teams shouldn't be racing to the bottom. So yeah. But I just don't know. It's interesting because Colin only highlighted a handful of schedules at the beginning. I guess I find it interesting that he chose to highlight the 49ers here. So far it's been the Broncos, the Chargers, the Lions, and the Packers, if memory serves me correctly. Those 4 schedules, those 4 teams he looked at. And then just after the regular national broadcast, and I'm sure later he'll go through the others, but to open the show and really say, hey, these are my first thoughts on this, these are the teams he's focusing on. And I just don't know. The 49ers schedule right now just doesn't land for me as something that screams, dude, we have to talk about this immediately. Have you seen this? We need to discuss this right now. That's just not my personal read on it. I guess, again, technically you could see the second half as really tough, a gauntlet. And I know I sound like a broken record, but I just think, well, it's football. If you're a competitive team, what are you expecting? Are you expecting to face the Miami Dolphins and the New York Jets 15 times? That's not how it works. So I don't know. Those are just my thoughts. I would absolutely love to hear yours. What do you guys all think about the San Francisco 49ers, their schedule potential, and what the impact could be? Do you understand what Colin is saying about the health aspect, how the first half might be much easier, but the second half is much harder, more physical, with more injury risk? That it slows them down, they don't bounce back as quickly, they're not ready for those harder games, which compounds the issues and then carries into the playoffs, or the lack thereof. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single comment. So whether you agree with me or disagree with me, either way, let's get into some discussions. Let's get into some fights, but ultimately let's just have some fun. Please do consider subscribing. We're building an amazing community here, and I absolutely love to see you part of it. I want to build something that we all generally feel connected to. Something that we're really excited to be part of. I think we're well on our way to doing it. Please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, it really does help with visibility and the algorithm. Thank you so much. See you next time.